And then today, the Senate will be considering the report of its Committee on Local and Foreign Debts on the 2018-2021 External Borrowing Plan. Well, that report, that was a request from Mr. President, and the committee has concluded its scrutiny of that request. And then their findings will be tabled on the floor of the Senate today for consideration and approval. And then we also expect that some bills will be coming for concurrence. That is, bills that have already been passed by the House of Representatives, but then they expect the Senate to concur on them. Well, we'll take you straight to the chamber because today's plenary has already taken off.
Such administrations paid attention to the prevention, prohibition, and punishment of money launderers. Some of the earliest legislations introduced in Nigeria to tackle the menace of money laundering include the Money Laundering Ethics Control Anti-Sabotage Decree Number 7, 1984, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency Decree Number 48 of 1989, now Cap 29 Law of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2003, and the Money Laundering Decree Number 3 of 1995. Defects or inadequacy of previous legislations on the subject of money laundering led to a series of legislative reforms, culminating into the enactment of the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2011, which this bill in turn seeks to repeal now and enact to make provisions for the comprehensive and effective anti-money laundering legislation, taking into consideration the changing patterns and techniques now being employed by money launderers in today's global village, driven by technological advancement. Apart from the need to address shortcomings in the Principal Act, the bill is further justified on the principle that money launderers and terrorists have not become familiar bedfellows, leveraging on latest technological advancements to design money laundering schemes that are mutually beneficial to terrorists and money launderers, with most of such schemes almost beyond the capacities of government security agencies to combat under the extant legal framework. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, considering the relevance of this bill to the control of money laundering activities and the prosecution of the war against corruption in Nigeria, I appeal to you, distinguished colleagues, to support the second reading of this bill. In compliance with Order 77.3 of the Senate Standing Orders 2015 as amended, the proposed bill has no additional financial burden on the Treasury or the federal government, if passed into law. I therefore urge my distinguished colleagues to support this bill for second reading. Thank you for your kind consideration.
Senator Samantha Adeyemi.
Mr. President, I rise to support this bill. To second this bill, Mr. President. Seconding this bill, Mr. President, I want to commend my brother, Senator Sadiq. And I want to say, Mr. President, that this bill is in furtherance with the determination of our government to fight corruption. There is no doubt that this government, more than any government in the history of our country, are taking the crusade against money laundering and corruption as a task that must be achieved. Mr. President, there is no doubt that billions of dollars and pounds abroad have been siphoned from our system to foreign nations, especially by those who have held political office in time past. In seconding this bill, Mr. President, I want to say we must equally look at how we can enlarge the net of exposing and arresting those who have siphoned money out of this country. In essence, this bill must take into consideration public office holders and their immediate families who have properties abroad to give account of how they acquired these properties. In this country, Mr. President, many people who have held public office in time past, what they have done is to siphon money abroad to buy properties in the name of their wives and their children. I want to submit, Mr. President, that there's a need to do an history of all those who have held public office in Nigeria to look at how they have acquired their properties and their children and their immediate families. That is when we can be seen to be fighting corruption. Any public office holder with in time past or present who have properties abroad and their children and their wives, it is not out of place for this bill to be all-encompassing. So we should know those who have acquired properties abroad in the name of their family members. That is why we can fight this corruption, Mr. President. Nigeria is bleeding now, and because our country is bleeding, we must take the courage. Those who have could go ahead to release some of the properties they have acquired. I say this without any fear of contradiction. I don't have any property abroad, not my children. Anybody that has acquired property who have held public office in time past should be ready to give account. Our country is bleeding, there is no job, people are dying of poverty. I support this motion of this bill. Well, once they start it for me, I don't have any property abroad. No, my children don't have any property abroad as I speak. So anybody that has property abroad or investment abroad should come out to tell us how they acquired this property. In doing that, that is when, Mr. President, we can say we are fighting corruption. President Buhari is determined and he has been doing that. We should support this government. Well, I see some reactionary. But Mr. President...
the single Senator Samantha Demi.
Place. All those properties abroad who are seated here should give account of how they acquired their properties.
Senator Samantha Demi, please round up.
On this note, my position is very clear, it's unambiguous. Let everybody give account and their children how they acquire properties. Sadano of Sokoto, who was the president.
Please round up, please.
Our political.
Distinguished colleagues. Hi. Distinguished colleagues, there are two bills that address similar or even the same issue. So we are taking the two bills together and then the contribution as well. So, Leader of the Senate, you invite the next person so that we discuss. The single colleagues who want to make contribution could do so.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, in order to have a combined debate on the two bills, I wish to also take the third order of the day, which is the second reading of Money Laundering, Prevention and Prohibition, Repeal and Reenactment Bill.
Distinguished colleagues, Senator Samantha Demi, please, those who are not in their seats, please, so that we listen to you spoke, people listen to you, should also sit and wait to listen, please. Leader.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, in order for us to have a combined debate, with your permission, I would like to also read the third order of the day, which is the second reading of Money Laundering, Prevention and Prohibition, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2021. This particular bill was read the first time in this chamber on 19th May 2021, and it was proposed and sponsored by Senator Suleiman Abdukari. So since the first one that was done by our distinguished Senator Sadiq, this one I would like Mr. President to kindly invite distinguished Senator Suleiman Abdukari to also move the motion so that the two bills, can receive this.
Okay, the distinguished colleagues, when Senator Suleiman Kwari presents the lead debate, those who want to contribute could do so either for the first bill or for the second bill or for both. But I want to advise that please, time is of essence here. We are supposed to close by 1 o'clock to enable our committees to go and continue with budget defense because this is the last week. So the Senator Suleiman Kwari, please present the lead debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, permit me to lead the debate on this very important bill, which seeks to repeal the Money Laundering Protection and Prohibition Act 2011 as amended and enact the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act to provide comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the prevention and prohibition of money laundering in Nigeria. This bill was read the first time in this hallowed chamber Wednesday, 19th May 2021. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Bill is a piece of legislation which, when passed, will help in the fight against corruption, money laundering, and terrorism. It is an open secret that the extant Money Laundering Act could not meet the required international standards, as there is still a high level of corruption and financial crimes in the country due to identifiable lacunas in the Act. In meeting the Financial Action Task Force recommendation aimed at ensuring a hitch-free admission into the membership of the FATF, this money laundering bill, when passed, will provide for an effective and comprehensive legal and institutional framework, all offenses related to the money laundering. The objective of the bill includes to provide for an effective and comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the prevention, prohibition, detection, prosecution, and punishment of money laundering and other related offenses in Nigeria. To strengthen the existing system for combating money laundering and associated predicated offenses, to make adequate provisions to prohibit money laundering, provide appropriate penalties, and expand the scope of supervisory bodies while recognizing the role of certain self-regulatory organizations to address the challenges faced in the implementation of a comprehensive anti-money laundering regime in Nigeria. The bill also seeks to provide protection for employees of various institutions, bodies, and professions who may discover money laundering. And finally, to establish special control units against money laundering under the Commission for effective implementation of money provisions of the Act in relation to designated non-financial businesses and professions. The enactment of this bill will further resolve the institutional issue of special control unit against money laundering under the Federal Ministry of Trade, and currently being managed by EFCC. It is pertinent to state that SCUMO is not a creation of statute and unknown to Nigerian law, a situation which has continued to hamper its functionality. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, you may wish to know that while the money laundering bill on one hand seeks to introduce certain supervisory and enforcement measures, including imposition of administrative penalties by the supervisory authorities on financial institutions, designated and non-designated businesses and professions for breach of any requirement imposed by law, it will therefore, on the other hand, establish Bureau for money laundering, which is to be domiciled in the NFIU instead of being managed by EFCC. From the foregoing, the need to advocate for the passage of the money laundering bill or Bureau to birth a redefined legal regime is eminent and more imperative on us if we are to achieve sustainable success in our combating money laundering and anti-corruption in general. Mr. President, most distinguished colleagues, flowing from all that I have said, and also considering the fact that this bill has no financial implication, I therefore most humbly solicit your support for the second reading of this bill, which I believe very strongly will positively impact our anti-corruption fight and ultimately our nation. I thank you and God bless. Thank you, Mr. President. I so submit.
Senator Ike Ikwaramadu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. I've listened carefully to the two bills, and let me first state clearly that the initial bill itself was not detailed in terms of what reforms it intends to bring to bear on the issue of money laundering. But the second bill was more specific. So I believe that there's absolute need to combine the two, or I believe that the first bill is rather subsumed the second bill. So if we either bring them together or probably drop the first one and proceed with the second one, I'm sure we would have achieved the same purpose. The other point that needs to be made is also to be sure that we are not over-legislating, because some of the issues now raised are the things that are within the powers of the EFCC. The special unit that was mentioned in the second bill is already being implemented by the EFCC. So if we go further now to probably create a chief executive for that special unit, then we're going to have problem between the executive chairman of the EFCC and a unit under him. So we need to be a little careful in creating some of these units and also ensuring that if we give powers to government institutions, they should be allowed to do the thing instead of sabotaging them further by creating some new agencies under them or units that at times conflict with their responsibilities, and then there's problem. So I believe that this should probably go to the committee, appropriate committee, and they should have to look at this holistically to be sure that we are not duplicating efforts or we are not over-legislating. But nevertheless, it is interesting to note that the law is dynamic. If we practice a law over a time and then there are some lacuna we discover, then we need to upgrade the law to meet the current realities. But law itself must be specific, it must be specific, and it must be clear. So if we are making a law and then I just ask you what is the impact of this law, we must be able to answer that question. So I believe that this one, especially the first one, is not as clear as it should be, but the second one is much clearer, but I believe that it still needs to be interrogated further especially with the provisions of the EFCC Act and the Money Laundering Act, which has given EFCC powers to implement that particular act. So if we discover that there's no value to be added, then we might leave matters as it is. But if there are values to be added, then we need to do it in such a way that we do not create any conflict between the existing institution of the EFCC and the special unit that is now being advocated. So otherwise, I believe that there's dynamism in law, but in doing so, it must be clear and specific. Thank you.
Senator Mohammed Ndume.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and my distinguished colleagues, Mohammed Ali Ndume, representing Borno South. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I stand to support both bills on the repeal and reenactment of the Money Laundering Act. Just as the former Deputy Senate President said, these laws were there before, but are not strong enough to achieve and to meet the international standard. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, you might be aware, last week, just exactly Saturday, the University of Ibadan invited me to lecture on unexplained wealth and the fight against corruption in the country. So I did some little research and discovered that most developed countries have strong institutions that are responsible for detecting unexplained wealth and going further to confiscate and dispose them into the government coffers. Now, anytime you bring up the issue of corruption, the first target or the short target is the politicians. That is particularly the members of the National Assembly and all that. But if you look at it critically, you will discover that after leaving this office and up to now that I've been in the National Assembly, I have not seen a member of House of Rep or senator that after his time in the National Assembly continue to be a rich man or live affluent life. I have not seen that yet, and I'm saying this on TV. Maybe somebody can come up to challenge it. But even just last week, there was this news that a director in the ministry, it was discovered that a director in the ministry had over 300 houses in Abuja by the ICPC. So that means that this law is something that this National Assembly should strive to support so that we would do what is needful of us and to nip this problem in the bud. I want to add that, Mr. President, this money laundering, even this act that is before us, the ICPC, the EFCC, are yet to be effective. Why? Because there is a fundamental constitutional problem that impedes on the fight against corruption. And that is the right by in the Constitution, which states that anybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. So the burden of proof is on the prosecutor. What we should strive when we analyze or we work on this bill is to holistically look at it and shift the burden of proof of innocence onto the accused. It is not a matter of sending somebody to jail. But if somebody steals something and you say that you must prove that he stole that thing, then you have a holistic tax. So if I have a house in Abuja here that is more than the mathematics of my income and that property does not equate, then I should explain where I got the money to buy that house. Unless we go further and strengthen and give teeth to this bill that we are processing, it will just be another waste of time. You go. Concept that you can, they call it plea bargain. You go and steal 1 billion, and then in the process of investigation, you surrender 200, and then you are let go.
and that encourages more of it. So what I'm saying, Mr. President, is that these two bills should be merged, looked into critically and holistically, so that we'll come out with something that works. I strongly support this bill, and this Senate has created history for, of milestone in certain critical areas. I think this is the most important, because the root of all problems that we have in this country is as a result of corruption that is sometimes even celebrated. That is my submission.
Senator, okay, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, Jeff. I represent the good people of Benue Northwest. I stayed too long in the House. Mr. President, I want to join my colleagues in supporting these two bills, one from Senator Kwari and Senator Umar. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, part of the reasons, the major reason why Nigeria is always rated very high on the corruption index is because we don't have good legal framework for containing corruption. I remember until 3 or so years back, there was always this complaint that we don't even have, we are not giving autonomy to the office of the Auditor General of the Federation that is supposed to, check how government is spending its money. So that never happened until 3 years. So it's a continuous process. And like pointed out in the arguments of both sponsors of these two bills, this Money Laundering Act, no matter how perfect, no matter how good it was, has to be updated, considering now we have ICT that is being manipulated by these criminals to advance their nefarious causes. And so you now talk about e-transfer, you talk about e-money, you talk about cryptocurrency and all of that, which was not foreseen just a few years back. So in looking at these bills, we have to, factor in all of the advancement in technology that is now being easily exploited by those who want to carry out these activities. But let me quickly address what Senator Ndume was talking about. I think as a lawyer, it offends sensibility that because if in your first year you are told that proof beyond reasonable doubt, and it's not just something that is in the Nigerian constitution, it's in constitutions across all Commonwealth countries. Unless we want to turn into an authoritarian state, you cannot begin to shift the burden. So that is normal, because the law will say that it is better for one free person, one criminal to go free than 1,000 criminals to go free than one innocent person to be convicted and sent to jail. So that is for safeguard in our legal system. But I agree with him, because he came out with that suggestion because of the concerns that are there for those who accumulate so much weight and get away with it by exploiting the legal framework that we have. But I think we should have more of this. Any of the laws that will have to be updated to take care of the advancement in technology, we need to bring them up and take care of them. Thank you so much.
Is there anybody against the bills? Okay. Those in favor that these two bills be read for the second time, say aye. Aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to repeal the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2011 as amended and enact the Money Laundering Prohibition and Prevention and Prohibition Act to provide comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the prevention and prohibition of money laundering in Nigeria, establish the Special Control Unit under the Economic and Financial Crime Commission, and for other related matters 2021 SB 789, second reading. Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to repeal the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2011 as amended and enact the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act to provide comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the prevention and prohibition of money laundering in Nigeria, and for other related matters 2021 SB 642, second reading.
Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to repeal the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2011 as amended and enact the Money Laundering Provision and Prohibition Act to provide comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the prevention and prohibition of money laundering in Nigeria, establish the Special Control Unit under the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and for other related matters 2021 second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Anti-Corruption and Financial Crimes to report back within 4 weeks. A bill for an act to repeal the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2011 as amended and enact the Money Laundering Prohibition and Prohibition Act to provide comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the prevention and prohibition of money laundering in Nigeria, and for other related matters 2021 second reading taken, and the bill is also referred to the Committee on Anti-Corruption and Financial Crimes to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues. The fourth order of the day is the second reading of the Niger Delta Development Commission NDDC Act number 6, 2000 Amendment Bill 2021. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this distinguished chamber on Tuesday, 17 December 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Solomon Olamilekan Adiola to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
Distinguished Senator Adiola Solomon Olamilekan, Lagos West, the largest senatorial district in Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague, Adiola Solomon Olamilekan, representing Lagos West Senatorial District, the largest senatorial district in Nigeria in terms of population. Mr. President, permit me to lead the debate on a bill for an act to amend the Niger Delta Development Commission Act number 6, 2000 for the inclusion of a new oil-producing areas and states and for other connected matter therewith 2019. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, you will recall that the bill was first presented by myself and it was read for the first time in these hallowed chambers on the 17th of December 2019. This bill seeks to amend the Niger Delta Development Commission Act 2000 to include states that have attained the status of oil-producing states with similar circumstances as those listed in the Act when it was passed. In this era of change, where government is desirous of raising revenue for development, the discovery of crude oil in new states in the country can only amount to additional revenue for the government. Following the discovery of oil in Bauchi, Lagos, Ogun, these states have officially joined the League of Oil-Producing States in Nigeria. Following the discovery of the crude oil in Alakari local government in Bauchi, Badagry in Lagos, Ipokia in Ogun, Baji in Kogi, and by virtue of these states are entitled to the 13% derivation that is due to oil-producing states according to the provision of Section 162, subsection 2 of the Nigerian Constitution. Mr. President, the purpose of this bill is for the Act to make provision for the new state who has joined the League of Oil-Producing States in Nigeria and for states that might eventually discover oil in the future, as opposed to the present position of the Act, which only covers oil-producing states within the Niger Delta region. Furthermore, the inclusion of the new oil-producing states in the Act saves costs and follow precedents. In conclusion, The amendment is to accord the state provision of the law, among other benefits accrued to oil-producing states in Nigeria, to the new oil-producing states and future oil-producing states. Following from the above, I am in support of the view that what we need is an amendment to the existing law already in existence, as opposed to enacting a new law that may be implemented due to conflicting with the existing law. I thank the Mr. President and my distinguished colleague. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I so move. Thank you.
Senator Ahmad Babakaita, Katsina North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I remain Ahmed Babakaita, representing Katsina North. First of all, I write to second the motion ably moved by Senator Olamulekong. And I so second. Can I go ahead to make my contribution, sir? I think this motion is timely, considering the new discovery of more oil producing states. And I want to believe that what is good for the goods is equally good for the guns. States like Borno that have discovered oil, and I remember very well the argument that the former MD of NMPC made here, that with such state coming on board, Nigeria will be able to be one of the largest producers if we harness our resources. So on this basis, I think it's only fair for us to consider those states that produce oil, because the consequences of exploration it's going to affect them equally. And it was actually, the whole motive and idea was to support states that produce oil and to mitigate against the consequences of oil exploration. And on that basis, I think it's only fair to include other states that are coming on board. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator George Thompson Sekibo, JP.
Senior President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Senator George Thompson Sekibo. Mr. President, I congratulate these states where my friend said they have discovered oil. What I don't know is whether the oil are in commercial quantities and they are also drilling them out for sales and the money going to Nigerian coffers. That one, he has not expatiated on that one. But I congratulate them for discovering oil there. We want oil to come out from every soil in the country. Are they exploring the oil? Are they refining the oil in these places? And has the oil caused any devastation in that environment? Mr. President, the purpose of the Niger Delta Development Commission Act is not just because they found oil there. It's because the place had been so devastated, and there is a need to see how they can remedy the place. And because that place is so backward, that far did not start now. We can refer to Wilson Commission in the 1950s. The same recommendation was made. But we observe something. Each time there is a bill or there is a law to support a backward people, to support the people who are suffering, Nigerians will come out after a couple of years to dampen, reduce the strength of that law. Today, we have river-basin development authorities all over the country. But that was actually recommended by Wilson Commission for the people of the Niger Delta region who are suffering at that time. So, Mr. President, There is nothing wrong that they are giving their 13% derivation. That is, if funds from those oil that are discovered are now in the market space, they are exploring them, they are exporting them, so they can check like other states, what quantum of oil are you supplying? And so they now pay the 30% derivation. The 30% derivation is not equal for all the states. It comes in different percentage based on production capacity. So I think it's automatic. If we have a production capacity and it's a 1 million barrel per year or whatever, they will pay you. But if you are not producing and you are not in the league of those who are producing oil, and enjoy that they discover oil under your ground, and so if you put in this one, this amendment does not stand the test of the ground. It does not stand the test of the ground because the parameters for the 13% is based on quantity of oil that is produced, that is being exported, that is being used by the country. So if they are producing oil, is also we are extracting it from the ground, they are selling it, it is not paying money to the Nigerian treasury, then all such persons will be qualified. Every state in the country is qualified for 30% derivation, provided the oil they have discovered in that area is being sold, or is being used, or is being explored to improve the finances of this country. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Matthew Rogide.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Senator Matthew Urogide. I represent Edo South Central District. Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, I consider it a privilege to make contribution to this bill that is being sponsored by Senator Adeola Solomon. Mr. President, first let me say I'm not particularly against the sponsor of this bill. I just believe that this bill must be properly proceeded. Let us start from the definition. Niger Delta Development Commission. Today, the area that constitutes Niger Delta is very clear. The 9 states of the Niger Delta region that make up the region that the Commission is serving are very clear. Senator Sakibo just mentioned the issue of oil production and the quota. Today, what each state gets from 30% derivation is a function of production. That's not where I'm going. Today, Gombe is already or fast becoming a host community. Bauchi and some of these other states. But to take these states to say that they belong to Niger Delta region, it's not possible. In as much as I will agree that if there's a percentage that is meant for states that produce oil, be they in Sokoto, be they in Yobe, let them, of course, benefit from whatever percentage that is meant for oil production. That does not make them to be part of the Niger Delta. I think we should proceed it properly. If the idea is that we want to share out of the 13%, they are at will, as long as they produce oil. But to say that they must belong to Niger Delta, it makes mockery of the original idea in the creation of NDDC. NDDC that was created as a commission is an interventionist commission or body to mediate the long dilapidation or degradation of the environment. So I think we should be able to draw the line. The whole idea behind this bill is to benefit from 30% derivation. This parliament can go ahead and make it 50%, make it 70% that everybody can benefit from. But to take one region in the north or take one state in the southwest and go and bring it to the south-south, this bill now will, so to make it Niger Delta Development Commission, you want to amend the act to bring in Ogun, to bring in Bauchi. I think, Mr. President, makes mockery of the original idea. Mind you, in 2001, This was the only bill that was vetoed by the National Assembly. And your very good selves from the other parts of the country, after having visited the region, you saw the level of dilapidation. You saw the misery. You saw the underdevelopment in the region. President Obasanjo was the president of Nigeria at that time. But the National Assembly vetoed it when he refused to sign that bill. So the sanctity of it and what must be maintained. We must be reminded the philosophy that was behind, that bill and eventually that act. So, Mr. President, I want to crave the indulgence of my colleagues, the sponsor of this bill, that you should capture it, the long title properly, but the way it is now to bring other states in the north and the southwest into the Niger Delta makes a mockery of the whole idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Your mic.
Omo Agege, Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, first I want to extend my congratulations to the states listed here in this lead debate, that is Bauchi, Lagos, Ogun, Kogi, etc., etc. And Anambra. I wish to congratulate them, Mr. President, as states that are now about to be classified as oil-producing states. I congratulate them, Mr. President. Just like my colleague from Rivers said, Mr. President, we look forward to the day when indeed all states in Nigeria will not only produce oil, but produce one form of mineral resource or the other. Mr. President, as I go and listen to this lead debate, there are two issues here. The first one, Mr. President, has to deal with the issue of whether or not these new states, these new quote-unquote oil-producing states are entitled to the benefit of Section 162, Subsection 2 of the Constitution, dealing with the issue of 13% derivation. Mr. President, to us, that is not an issue. To the extent that they produce oil in commercial quantity, and DPRO are so determined that this oil is being sold and the revenue is entering the financial account, they're entitled. That is not the issue here, Mr. President. The issue is whether or not, the issue is whether or not, just because the oil producing, they should come under the Niger Delta Development Commission. Mr. President, if you are ever looking for a meddlesome interloper, you don't have to go too far to find one. What this bill, this lead debate, clearly shows that my colleague from Lagos here is a classic meddlesome interloper. Mr. President, the Niger Delta Development Commission is a regional development commission. We must draw a distinction between the NDDC and the Oil and Minerals Producing Commission, UNPADEC. Mr. President, if this lead debate were made to introduce these states into the Oil Minerals Producing Commission, UNPADEC, at that time, Mr. President, there would be no problem. But this is clearly a regional development commission. Mr. President, Lagos is not in the Niger Delta. Ogun State is not in Niger Delta. Even as we speak, Mr. President, we are having an issue with Ondo State. We are having an issue with Ondo State, Mr. President, being classified as a state under the NDDC. But the bulk of the problem we have today is because of that. Mr. President, I, as a senator representing Delta Central Senatorial District, I have no objection, and indeed, I did support the establishment of the Northeastern Development Commission, NEDC. I supported it, Mr. President, in the 8th Senate. Mr. President, when the bill was brought here for the Southeast Development Commission. I also supported it. So too is the Southwest Development Commission. Mr. President, my colleague from Lagos should be told to pursue with vigor the establishment of the Southwest Development Commission and not the inclusion of Lagos in the Niger Delta Development Commission. So, Mr. President, I know that at this stage of this debate, this is a debate on the general principles, but it is important that we state our position clear and this early. I thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and my distinguished colleagues. To start with, in order to appreciate the purpose of this debate, it's important for us to look at the historical antecedent.
Distinguished colleagues, the chamber is noisy, please. Can all those who are elsewhere go back to their seats, please?
It's for us to appreciate the historical antecedents for the establishment of the Niger Delta Development Commission. We all knew what that body was. I remember it used to be called UNPADEC. Yes. Under the then former director of SSS, Mr. Hosford. Yeah. Now, in recognition of the fact that the desired intended results for the establishment of UNPADEC were not achieved, that was what led the National Assembly to sit down and carefully look at the uniqueness of Niger Delta challenges and come out with the Niger Delta Development Commission. And the reason being that there were agitations that were strictly bordered on degrading the environment of the Niger Delta by that time. And the government, in its response through the parliament, felt that these challenges were genuine. At one stage or the other in the history of this country, we had issues that were not too pleasant to repeat, but we cannot deny that they existed, which almost shook the very foundation of this country. So this bill, beautiful, considered as it may look, it may not be expedient to tie it to the Niger Delta Development Commission. Rather, in the same vein that Niger Delta has its unique challenges, Lagos itself has very unique challenges and requires intervention of Parliament for the purpose of addressing those challenges. And they have continued to build up. Today, for you to drive from Surulere to Apapa, you are looking for the whole. The entire revenue of Lagos State, part of it has been heavily invested in order to alleviate this situation, but nothing appears to be happening that can show visibly that the result can be achieved. So my own thinking is that the fact that we have discovered oil in Lagos, the fact that we have discovered oil in Ogun, Bauchi, which are I don't know how to use this language, but we have equally found oil in Sokoto. Yes. And you remember, Mr. President, when we were doing the PIB bill, all these issues were canvassed that justified the decision that this parliament took, which some of our colleagues, for reasons best known to them, were not happy with it. But they knew that they were taking in the overall interest of this country. They knew. So my concern is this. This request is genuine. This request is founded. The parliament has a responsibility to intervene. But the intervention cannot be justified
by aligning it to the Niger Delta Development Commission, it will create more problems that it seeks to solve. So my own thinking is that the intervention of this parliament should be a certain fund that can be used to address the challenges of these new areas where oil is found. And in doing so, we might have to recouch this bill at the committee level to capture the very essence and the reason d'etat for sponsoring the bill before the Senate. I'm in support of the bill, but I believe that we can do a lot more by detaching it from the Niger Delta Development Commission and doing something extraordinary to address the challenges that these new places and such other places that may be found from time to time may face for the purpose of oil exploration. Thank you, sir.
Senator Ahmed Anjumo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Mohammed Nanjumo Goje, representing Gombe, Central Gombe State. Mr. President, I stand to support this bill by a lot of reservations and amendments. One, the lead debate by the sponsor has either mistakenly, by commission or omission, omitted my local government in Gombe State, which also has oil. Alkaliri and Akko are the same, are contiguous. Oil is discovered between Alkaliri and Akko local government in Gombe State. You should have mentioned Akko, Gombe State, then Alkaliri in both states, so that Nigerians will know that this is not only Bauchi that has oil, Gombe State also has oil. But like the last speaker said, I support if eventually any state gets oil, it should be entitled to that 13% derivation. But we should not tie just every state that gets oil should join Niger Delta. How do we justify Gombe State or both states joining Niger Delta? Doesn't make sense. But that will not disqualify Gombe State or State from getting their 13% derivation if they have the oil. So I think this bill should be amended in a way that is a bill canvassing for the inclusion of states, whatever state that have oil, to be entitled to 13% derivation. But they don't necessarily have to be in Niger Delta region. When we presented our case for North Development Commission, it was because of our peculiar circumstances at that time, even now prevailing, just like the case of Niger Delta. So I really concur with the idea of giving us 13%, those of us who have oil, if it can be measured and quantified, but we don't have to be in Niger Delta. Thank you, Mr. President.
Those in favor that this will be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act amend the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC Act Number 6, 2000, and for other related matters connected there with 2021, SB 273, second reading.
A bill for an act to amend the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, Act Number 6, 2000, and for other matters connected there with 2021, second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Niger Delta to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fifth order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Local and Foreign Debts on the 2018-2021 Federal Government External Borrowing Rolling Plan. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Clifford Odia to move the motion for the Senate to receive and consider the report.
Order.
Distinguished Senator Clifford Odia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My very esteemed colleagues, I'm Senator Clifford Odia. I represent...
Chairman, I hope you're not going to read this, all the pages. give us a summary, please.
So move, Mr. President.
Senator Bima Mohamed Enagi.
Thank you, Mr. President. My highly respected, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Bima Mohamed Enagi. I represent the people of Niger South from Niger State. I rise to second the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debts. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Local and Foreign Debts on the 2018-2021 Federal Government External Borrowing Rolling Plan, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. Chairman, you may let the report, please, and make copies available. You may present the report now.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the committee report on local and foreign debt on the proposed 2018-2020 external borrowing rolling plan number 2. The Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on Tuesday, the 1st of June, 2021, considered a request from the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria requesting for the Senate approval of the Federal Government 2018-2020 external borrowing rolling plan as contained in the communication dated 6 May 2021. The 2018-2020 external borrowing rolling plan contained a request for approval in the sum of 36,837,281,256 United States dollars plus 910 million euro and grant component of $10 million. The communication, together with the attached schedule, was referred to the Committee on Local and Foreign Debt for further legislative action, and after legislative interaction, deliberations and due diligence to report, a report number 1 was laid by this committee before the Senate in July 2021, recommending approval of the sum of 8,575,526,537 United States dollars and 490 million euro. To be recalled that the Senate at the plenary in July 2021 approved financing for projects as recommended by the committee above, while the committee continued further legislative action and consideration of the outstanding request. Subsequently, on the 5th of September 2021, the President of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria read another communication from the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces containing an addendum to the 2018-2020 external borrowing rolling plan in the sum of $4.054 billion, 710 million euro, and grant component of $125 million for various projects, and same was referred to the committee for further legislative action. The request of Mr. President is in compliance with the provisions of the Debt Management Office Establishment Act 2003 and the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which both enjoined Mr. President to seek and obtain the approval of the National Assembly in respect of the external borrowing program of the Federation and the states. The provision of the above statutes, together with the revised guidelines for external domestic borrowing issued by the DMO, pursuant to the powers under the DMO Act, require that all tiers of government of the Federation shall borrow only under the following conditions. 1, shall specify the purpose for which the borrowing is intended, which shall only be for long-term capital expenditure and human capital development. 2, such borrowing shall be on concessional terms with low interest rates and with a reasonably long amortization period. 3, shall present a cost-benefit analysis detailing the of the purpose for which the intended borrowing will be applied. 4, shall provide satisfactory proof of the existence of prior authorization in appropriation law for the purpose for which the borrowing is to be utilized. 5, such borrowing shall have the approval of the relevant Executive Council. 6, such borrowing shall be approved by resolution of the relevant legislative assembly. And 7, such external borrowing agreements shall be executed for and on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria by the Minister of Finance or any other person the minister may designate in writing. Financial institutions and development agencies are required by the above statutes to request and obtain proof of compliance with the provisions of Part 6, Part 10 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act before lending to any government in the Federation. The Act provides that failure to do so is an offense and may render the facility unlawful, thus unforeseeable among other sanctions. Of the committee. The committee has the mandate of the Senate to consider the above request and make appropriate recommendations for consideration and approval of the Senate at plenary. Methodology. The task before the committee was to undertake a thorough and detailed consideration of every project together with the proposed terms and conditions, and start with the borrowing from the development agency provided the fund, in order to ensure that the genuine need to borrow and ability to repay is established. Due to the enormity of the task and the need for careful consideration and appraisal of the various projects and the intended financial accommodation sought, the committee decided to adopt a phased approach to the consideration. The committee formally invited 17 relevant and necessary federal ministries, departments, and agencies, and Kaduna State government as listed below. The committee received written presentation from some of the MDAs and thereafter invited them for further engagement in defense of their submissions. All the MDAs invited and ministries are listed below. The committee held interactive sessions with the MDAs whose representatives were in attendance at the committee hearing and an interactive session for detailed briefing, provide further documentations of information, deal with questions, and clarify issues. The reference documents that we relied on are the following: communication from Mr. President together with the attached schedule, the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, the Debt Management Office Act 2003, revised to 2021 external and domestic borrowing guidelines for federal and state governments and their agencies issued by the DMO, previous reports of the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt, documents presented by the various stakeholders, committee findings and observations. The committee reaffirms its findings as contained in the report laid before the Senate, which was condemned and approved in July 2021, with no material alterations or change in circumstances informing the various observations and findings. 2, the committee continued to receive and note with utmost importance the genuine and very serious concern of Nigerians about the level and sustainability to serviceability of our borrowing activities within the last decade. The committee further notes that our debt service figures, which continue to increase, reached an all-time high of around 95% of our retained revenue and 35.6% of our annual expenditure, which no doubt constitutes a huge drain on our revenue, thereby limiting resources available for national developmental projects and human capital development. The committee continues to reiterate its stance on the need for a more proactive and broad-based approach to revenue enhancement related issues, because our revenue to debt ratio, debt and revenue ratio are way beyond acceptable levels. The committee knows that there are noticeable improvements in our revenues, but the growth is not sufficient or rapid enough to catch up with the pace of development required for our nation, not to mention the forced expense profile on insecurity and COVID-19 pandemic. The committee, however, knows that the need for rapid infrastructural and human capital development requires increase in government spending in order to cope with our population growth and our outdated and or dilapidated infrastructure. The committee knows that a good number of the projects in respect of which financing is being requested under the 2018-2020 National Borrowing Rolling Plan are mostly ongoing projects and programs in respect of which external borrowed funds have been spent in the past, including loans and grants. 8. The committee found as a fact that out of the sum of over $22.8 billion approved borrowing by the National Assembly under the 2016-2018 External Borrowing Rolling Plan, only $2.8 billion, that is 10%, have been disbursed to Nigeria. The committee therefore knows that the great pressure placed on human financial resources of the National Assembly to approve loans under medium-term external borrowing plan is unnecessary. The committee observes that these projects, some of which requires additional financing, will have a great multiplier effect on stimulating economic growth through infrastructural development, job creation, poverty alleviation, health care, and improve our security architecture. 11. The projects will also stimulate a rebate of commercial and engineering activities, and the consequent tax revenues payable to government as a result of these productive activities will increase. Specific findings and observations in respect of the various proposed projects are listed below. They can be, you can access them from page 7 of 19. Up to page 17 of 19. Recommendation. One, that the Senate do approve the underlisted ongoing negotiation of external borrowing in the sum of 16,230,77,718 US dollars and 1,028 million euro and a grant component of $125 million under the 2018-2020 External Borrowing Rolling Plan. The details of the funding agencies as detailed below. 1, World Bank. The corresponding amount is stated there, which is $3.52 billion. China Exim Bank, $5.078 billion. Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, $3.902 billion. China Development Bank, $2.893 billion. French Development Agency, 345 million euro. European Investment Bank, 175 million euro. European Consortium, $190.2 million. International Capital Market, 500 million euro. Standard Chartered Bank, Sanoco, $62.120 million, totaling $16.23 billion and 1.02 billion euro. The attached funds required by the agencies and the funding and the corresponding amounts are stated as follows. Under the power sector, 1, Nigerian electrification project, off-grid, $350 million to be funded by World Bank. 2, the 330 kV Dixie not-core interconnection of Nigeria to Niger to Benin to Togo to Burkina Faso, $29.3 million to be financed by World Bank. 3, Nigerian Transmission Expansion Project, NTEP 1, the cost of $210 million to be financed by African Development Bank. 4, Northern Corridor Transmission Project, at a cost of 245 million euro to be financed by French Development Agency. Under the National Identity Management Commission, the project that is to be funded is a National Digital Identity for Development Project at $100 million to be financed by French Development Agency. We have the Bank of Industries, sovereign guarantee for the issuance of Eurobond as collateral to enable Bank of Industry fund these projects. The amount is between 500 million euro, but no more than 750 million euro to be financed by international capital market. The educational sector, Ministry of Education and Universal Basic Education. 1 is the innovation, development, and effectiveness in the acquisition of skills projects, which is $200 million to be funded by World Bank. The Adolescent Initiative Learning Empowerment Project to be financed at a cost of $500 million to be financed by World Bank. And the Better Education Service Delivering for all Global Partnership for Educational Grants is a grant from the World Bank at $125 million. The transportation sector, Ministry of Transportation. 1, the projects that are captured under that ministry are 1, Nigeria Coastal Railway Project, Lagos Benin City segment, at a cost of $3.141 billion to be financed by China Exim Bank. 2, the Nigerian Coastal Rail Project, Benin, Onitsha, including Onitsha Railway Project branch, at a cost of $1.711 billion, also to be financed by Chinese Exim Bank. The 3rd one is Nigeria Coastal Rail Project, Benin City, Warri, Yenagoa, Port Harcourt segment, at the cost of $2.89 billion to be financed by China Development Bank. 4, Central Line Project, which Abuja, Baro, Itakwe, Ajakuta segment, at the cost of $3.9 billion to be financed by Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. The Lagos-Ibadan Railway Modernization Project, construction of standard branch lines, Papa Tinkerland Port, the cost of $225.1 million, to be financed by Exim Bank. Then the Kano Maradi SGRO with branch to Duse, the cost of $190.2 million to be financed by European Consortium. Total amount of projects under the other transportation ministry is $12.064 billion. The next is the Financial and National Planning sector, which is Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. The first project there is Nigerian Power Sector Recovery Performance-Based Program at the cost of $750 million to be financed by World Bank. The second one is the COVID-19 Response Support Program to be financed by, which is $288.5 billion to be financed by African Development Bank. The total project under the Ministry of Finance is $1.788 billion. Then under the health sector, we have the health sector. The projects under the health sector include 1, accelerating nutrition results in Nigeria project, which is $222 million to be financed by World Bank. Then the multi-phase programmatic approach immunization plus and malaria progress by accelerating coverage and transforming service impact projects at a cost of $450 million to be financed by World Bank. And the third one is Nigeria COVID-19 Preparedness and Response Project, ESCOREP, additional financing for $400 million to be financed by World Bank. So the total projects under the Health Ministry is $1.175 billion. They have the The next one is Women Affairs, Ministry of Women Affairs. The project there is Nigeria for Women project for $100 million to be financed by World Bank. Then you have the Ministry of Environment, which they have two projects there. One is Nigeria Erosion and Watershed Management Project, additional funding for $400 million to be financed by World Bank. Then the second one is the Climate Adaptation, Erosion and Watershed Project, which is $175 million to be financed by European Investment Bank. Then you have the government institutions, that's National Assembly, provision of 17 megawatts hybrid solar power infrastructure for National Assembly for $62.12 million to be financed by Signatories to Standard Chartered Bank. So the total request, total amount recommended under this submission is $16.20 billion and 1.02 billion euro, and a grant component of $125 million. Two, that the Senate do approve the request relating to the Bank of Industries for the issuance of 500 million euro, but not more than 750 million euro bond in the international capital market. Three, that the terms and conditions of the loan from the funding agencies forwarded to National Assembly prior to the execution of same for concurrence and proper documentation. Conclusion. Committee wishes to essentially express appreciation to the State Senate leadership for the opportunity to serve this capacity. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Comments? Otherwise, we'll go to the recommendations. The recommendations on page 16 of 19, item 25. Recommendation 1, that the Senate do approve the underlisted ongoing negotiation of external borrowing in the sum of 16,230,077,718 dollars, 1,020,000,000 euros, and a grant component of $125 million under the 2018-2020 external borrowing rolling plan. The funding agencies dollars. B, China Exim Bank, 5,78,441,252 dollars. Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, 902,267,260 dollars. China Development Bank, 2,893,693,930 dollars. Africa Development Bank, $698,500,000 dollars. French Development Agency, 345 million euro.
Well, this is where we'll round off today's live broadcast of Senate plenary. Well, at the moment, Senate is considering the report of its committee on local and foreign debts on the request by the federal government for external borrowing of 16.2 billion United States dollars and 1 billion euros for the 2018 and 2020 federal government external borrowing plan. Well, before this time, the Senate had passed two bills that seek to repeal the Money Laundering Prohibition Act of 2021, and which seeks to enact the Money Laundering Prevention and Prohibition Act, which, among other issues, is to establish a special control unit under the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Well, at this point in time, we will now hand you over to our studios so as to continue with our scheduled programs for the day. I am Ignatius Unko, and on behalf of our outside broadcast crew, enjoy the rest of our programs.
Did you get get to see the way